Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests in the live stream, dear speakers, Bishop Dominic from Kenya, Prince Ludwig from Bavaria, Mr. Mohammed Gulaid, he is switched on per video, Veyatata from Cameroon. A warm welcome to all of you here at the Hanns-Seidel Foundation. I want to welcome you on behalf of the head of the foundation. I'm speaking as his representative. And I also want to welcome Monsignor Huber, the head of Missio Munich, and as mentioned, all participants in the live stream and here in this hall. Thank you for being here. I want to present myself as well. My name is Klaus Liepert. I am the head of the unit for Africa south of the Sahara, and I'm also representative of the worldwide work that we're doing. This event that we are being present here today is the third time that we're doing this. It's a common joint event together with Missio, with the aid organization, and the Hanns-Seidel Foundation. In 2020, we were talking about Somalia, in 2021 about Senegal, and today, in the year 2022, we are going to talk about Kenya, especially about the collaboration, economic collaboration projects, etc. The Hanns-Seidel Foundation and Missio are both foundations or organizations that, on different ways, but somehow similar, we have talked about this right now, Mr. Monsignore, in many things we are similar. We're working in the same countries, we are representative overall, and also the special connection and closeness to the people living there. And we want to see the real needs, and we want to help. Missio and also we have the common background to try to give a contribution and to improve the circumstances of life for the people that are living in poorer countries, especially in Africa. And we are fighting to develop a sensitive or reasonable contribution, and a couple of words about the work in Kenya. We have been working there since the 80s in different areas. We have worked in the area of agriculture, and this is also, Missio is an important partner of us. Also, the Economic Center for Justice and Peace has been a member or a partner of us for years, for information also of the people there, and we also work in many different areas, very successful, for example, the development of women as well, for economic development. We have a lot of good partners that we're working with together for many years. And as I have mentioned today, this evening, it is important for us to hear voices from the countries where we are working, in this case from Kenya, because unfortunately often they're not heard enough. For German and European development work, it is very important to listen, and this sometimes is not happening. And the title of this event is Africa's Future, Who is Helping Whom? Examples of Meaningful Cooperation from Kenya and Germany. And today, this evening, we're looking at good approaches for collaboration, but we also want to question certain things that we do. And Africa, or the countries of Africa, compared to Germany, they also have many advantages. For example, there are not as many ideologies as, for example, here in Germany, and these are big chances, because last year in Kenya I visited an event of the Hanns-Seidel Foundation where it was about Industrial Revolution 4.0 and the further development of artificial intelligence. So in Kenya, the possibilities were discussed, and here in Germany, we often think about limits and restrictions. So this was a good picture for me to see what is possible in those countries. And I think that there is a lot of hope, or they have hope, and we should really promote this hope. And so today we're looking forward to a good collaboration about fresh impulses for our future work. And I also want to welcome our friend, Mr. Sepper from missio, who is going to lead us through the program today, through the agenda, supported by Mrs. Huber. She has been responsible for the organization today, and I want to thank her at this point, and also Mrs. Kyung, who is hosting the chat. Mr. Monsignor Huber, I also want to thank you on behalf of the Hanns-Seidel Foundation for this trustful collaboration that we have, and I would like to you to come on stage and give us a couple of words. Ladies and gentlemen that are here today with us, dear guests, dear participants, for me it is a great pleasure to, as Mr. Lippert has already mentioned, to be here for the third time together at Hanns-Seidel Foundation on behalf of the month of this foundation, and to have an event together where we can exchange. And this is for us a very important momentum. We from missio are working as an aid organization, and together with the partners, we are trying in the African countries, but also in Asia, for example, and Oceania, to do things together, look at things together, to go common paths, to have life quality, to foster life quality. And this is something that brings us back together again and again. There is need for discussion, as you have mentioned, but it's also a chance to design things together. And in this month of World Mission, we are doing this especially regarding Kenya. And I am very delighted to be here together today and to have such a great podium today, because our history is also somehow reflected today in the speakers. Missio Munich was founded by King Ludwig I in 1838, and we are thankful that the connection to the House of Wittelsbach through the time has lasted. And the intention back then was already to find missioners from Bavaria who went to Africa and to other countries and other continents to support them, so that the people on site in the countries could have a life quality. And times have changed, of course, but I think, and I'm thankful, that the commitment, especially of the House of Wittelsbach, and here represented by you, Prince Ludwig, that it is still represented, and that together we can still continue common paths. And Bishop Dominic from Eldoret is somebody who also suits this collaboration very well, because together with him and also with the deceased Pater Florian, we have started a lot of things for the people in this region and at the kind of lake, that they get our support. And in the World Mission Month, this year, we have looked for a word in the book of Jeremiah, and it's about future and hope. And this is something that I think should be a common thread in all the projects, all the prayers, etc. And this is why we are positive about the events that we're having here in this month, also with the support that we receive from many people, that we're able to start a lot of good things. And I think that it's not only about the question who is helping whom, but about where everyone has his or her position and what or how they can help where they are, and how can they design their tasks so that other people have life quality. And I, as president of Missio Munich, I'm very thankful for all the people who are helping us, who are supporting us, and we're looking positively on the next Saturday or next Sunday, where we will also celebrate this together, and we can also say thank you for the support. So once again, a big thank you to all of you who are here today, who are discussing together with us, and to Hanns-Seidel-Stiftung for this great collaboration. Thank you very much, Klaus Liepert. Thank you, Monsignor Hubert, for your warm words. A warm welcome here to all of you in this hall, also to the people listening to us in the live streams, Facebook, YouTube, and so on. We're looking forward to a very exciting discussion. And before we start the discussion, we want to present our 4 guests. You can see 2 guests here in this room, but there are 2 guests that are also participating online. We will see them in a couple of minutes. And as a host, we will be here, Mrs. Jeanette Huber. We're going to say hello to our guests on the screen. I'm going to start, as it's done nowadays via Zoom. I'm going to shake my hand to say hello, and I think that the connection to Nairobi will be working as well soon. So first of all, we're going to present the guests here in the room. I'm especially delighted to welcome the guest right next to me, who had the longest journey, Bishop Dominic Kimengich. He is a Catholic bishop in Eldoret, Kenya, and has been a bishop for 10 years in Ludwig, in the north of Kenya, at the border to Uganda and South Sudan, Ethiopia. This is a very interesting region, also a challenging region, and it's a really a great work that you have done here. And Bishop Dominic is a man of peace. He is somebody who wants to have peace, and has also reached to have peace between different communities. And we're looking forward to your contribution. I am very delighted to be able to welcome you here. So warm welcome, Bishop Dominic.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I am also delighted to welcome Prince Ludwig from Bavaria. Thank you for taking your time. Before we started, we saw the picture from Loropio, the place close to Lake Turkana in the south of Kenya. It's a big lake, nevertheless. There you have started learning lions together with partners on site, and I like to think back to the visit in February, where we saw the futuristic campus that was designed there by architect Francis Carré from Burkina Faso. This is a really spectacular building, and there are a lot of ideas behind it, vision for the most different approaches, development approaches, and we're looking forward to your ideas and your concepts that you have brought us to make also to depict what is possible and where the path is going to, if you're really bold and have a vision. So a warm welcome to you, Prince Ludwig from Bayern. And we also are happy that the stream is working to Dortmund, to Mrs. Fayetata. Warm welcome to you. I'm going to say a couple of more words about her, and I also would like to welcome Mr. Gulade in Nairobi in Kenya. He is in the office of the Hanns-Seidel-Stiftung in Kenya right now. Mr. Gulade, you are known to us for many years through the collaboration in Kenya when you were working as head of FCDC Kenya and the Frontier County Development Council. This is an association of 10 areas in the north and northeast of Kenya, and also as governor of Isiolo, one of the regions that is also in this area. And these areas are structurally weak, and after this work, many years that you have done, you have been very close to the citizens, so you will be able to tell us about the situation there. And after the re-elections, you are also a part of the government. You're working for the government of Kenya as a coordinator between the World Bank and an initiative that is going to help the weak regions in North and Northeast Kenya. So how this is going to look like, and which ideas you have, which approaches, this is something that we're very excited to hear about. So a warm welcome to you as well. Thank you for taking your time and being here. Mrs. Fayetata, we are especially delighted to welcome you as well, and not only to have a woman here present as well, but also because we know that we have somebody that is from Cameroon but has been living for more than 30 years in Germany. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you are from Dortmund. You also have, for sure, a very special point of view. You are from Cameroon, but you have been for decades in Germany, and you are very committed, not only when it comes to work in Germany, but also politically, socially active. You are working as an IT specialist, but furthermore, you are also in project management and also in the area of intercultural communication. You have been dealing with political topics, media topics. You are owner of the organization Africa Positive, catering and events, and you're also a volunteer in the magazine of Africa Positive. And 2 times we have listened, or we have heard the word positive, so I'm sure that you will tell us positive things as well. So we're looking forward to your approaches, to your point of view on Africa from Germany. So tonight it's about Kenya, but not only about Kenya, it's also about East Africa, and we want to look at the relations in general between Western countries, Europe, and the African continent, the African countries. There are a lot of things happening right now, so we're looking forward to your perspective. A warm welcome to you as well, and thank you for taking the time.
Yes, and before we start with the discussion, I would like to invite everyone today, in the live stream and also in this room. So during the discussion, we're going to receive questions that we cannot answer immediately. If you want to ask questions, you find a field in the chat where you can enter your question and send it. So our colleague Sandra Chong is waiting to sort the questions, and then we will pass them to our guests and also to the audience here in the room. So there will be the opportunity to ask questions later. So let us start to look at Kenya in Eastern Africa. that is, a stability factor within the region that is standing at an interesting moment of the history, because a new government with Miyamoto was elected. And I remember in February when we visited Kenya, you heard a lot that the election campaign started. Who's going to be the follow Raila Odinga or Vila Ruto were the strongest candidates. And there was also this fear that after the elections in August, that there could be conflicts, unrest or violence. So there weren't any. So the elections took part, and the result was quite, close. And so the court confirmed the elections. Mr. Bishop Dominic, you were highly active in various programs. So how did you manage, or how was it managed to conduct these peaceful elections? And what's the situation now, would you say? So the peace is stable? So how has this been achieved, and at which point does Kenya stand at the moment?
Thank you very much. I want to say that Eldoret, where I come from, is the home of the new president, William Ruto. And of course, there were a lot of anxieties in regard to the elections, because the problem with Kenya is that every election year, when the results come, there have been always contestation. So even this time round, we were not so sure that things will be smooth as they have been. And I really want to thank God and to thank the many people who this time round came out and said that we would like to have peaceful elections. So there were a lot of peace meetings. For example, in Eldoret, where it was termed as a hotspot and people were expecting that there will be violence, there were a lot of peace activities, people meeting together, citizens coming together, stakeholders coming together. And we all say that this time around, we would like to see peace prevailing in the area. So we were very active also as church, trying to bring people together, even from different religious groups, also the civil societies in Eldoret. So there was that desire from everybody that we would like to have peaceful elections. What really contributed also was the process. The electoral process this time was very transparent, and that helped to calm the situation, because people could see the results being transmitted and they would count the votes. And so because of that, so the people accepted the elections. So we are very grateful that this time round we're able to do and have peaceful elections, and the country now is really very stable and very peaceful.
Thank you very much, Bishop Dominic. Mr. Goulet, you're new in the office, so you know the approaches of the old, replaced government. And I'm sure you have new plans. So which are the new approaches, if I hear that right? The previous government, they wanted to build infrastructure and also took debts. And what is the dividend? And which ways does the government go? So what is your idea of the situation? What are the tasks of the new government? If you could tell us, please share your ideas on that.
statt die Verbindung schlecht zu sein. Versuchen Sie vielleicht die etwas zu stabilisieren. Frau Tata, Sie sind
Mr. Tata,
Beobachterin
Mr. Tata, you're observer of many political procedures. So based on, seeing things from afar, so what would you expect from the country, Kenya? So we should not bring you into the position to give us smart proposals and ideas. And you are a journalist, and so you're always, able to look at the political connections. So what is your idea on that? As a change of power, the democratic power, change of power, the results were accepted. What do you see? What is going on then?
Genau, guten Abend nochmal.
So, hi to everyone who is connected online. I'm happy to be here today. So, to your question, first of all, you need to say Africa consists of 54 countries. And I must say, Kenya is one of the role model countries, showcase countries also in Africa when it comes to economic development. When you talk about Africa, you need to talk about Kenya, Botswana, and Ghana. And this election process, unfortunately, I cannot really understand her. And so without violence, and so hopefully things can stabilize.
Ja, Sie haben recht, das ist schon der erste
positive
Aspekt,
That's the first positive aspect that you have to pick.
Am Beginn der Diskussion gar nicht unwichtig festzuhalten. Unsere Vorstellungen sind ja auf Afrika
focused on other things in Africa, crises and catastrophes. So Kenya has embarked on a good route. So Prince Ludwig, why is it still important so to look at different aspects in Kenya? For example, so the local lions, they're looking at the young population to give them new perspectives. And can you give us an idea about your concepts? So why is a region like the northern region of Kenya, Burkana, why is that a region that has an initiative like the Learning Lions? Yes, thank you. So when you talk about Kenya, it's similar with the continent. I mean, of course, there's a lot of countries, and Kenya has a lot of different regions where things look different. So when you are in Nairobi, you have a flourishing IT community with great locations, wonderful premises, great events, hackathons, and so on. That's a vibrant, the IT scene is vibrant. But when you talk about Turkana, then you're in a completely different situation. And Bishop Dominic could tell us a lot about it, because he was the bishop there for 10 years, and now it has been, developed. But also the differences between the different regions in Kenya can be so big as the differences on the entire African continent. And I personally found this work, so without meaning this negatively, but you can talk about the problem zones of Africa, which quite often don't follow country borders. So the country borders, were made by a line made by Bismarck, and they don't, correspond to reality. So we also have to look at different regions in Africa, and so you have to work completely differently. So you can work differently in Nairobi as you can in Turkana. And when you look at the great territories, which are development problem zones, when you look at that, and of course then you have to create different programs. So you can't have the same approach like in Nairobi. So during the past 2 years, also I experimented around with IT, but we didn't have any people that went to the college or who studied IT in the university, but we started from scratch. So with the learning lines, we wanted to show, and we moved forward, that someone who has never had access to a computer before, so within 1 or 2 years only, even faster sometimes, is able to work on the computer and to render services that no one buys in Turkana, but probably people buy in the US or someone in Germany. So that means when you are in these problem zones, when you're sitting in these in the desert, when you grew up without potable water, when you had to walk to the well and for many kilometers, now the same person as someone when there was in the school in Turkana, you know, a lot of schools are being built, and so the Catholic Church has done a great job there for decades now. So at least when you went to school, then probably you don't have any other chances, because the youth are more than 95%. But you can have good chances with your computer, and that's the different thinking that you need to have. There's a lot of unemployment in Nairobi, but you have more chances. So when you're somewhere confined somewhere in the desert, then things you can still be good as long as you have internet access, which, by the way, is much better in Africa than it is here in Bavaria. And in Turkana Lake, you have 4G. And I know a lot of regions in Bavaria where you don't have any internet at all. And I mean, hello. So you can show people, how can I build my own path, you know, my own career, my own future. So let's try to go back to Mr. Gule and ask him how you deal with those differences in the region. Mr. Gule, sorry we had a technical problem before. So we weren't able to tell you that we had a technical problem. So let's try it again. I'm sure you can hear me, but we have to see whether I, as a translator, can hear you.
Dann dürfen Sie es gerne nochmal die Ausführungen. Wir haben nach wie vor das gleiche Problem. Kurz an die Technik, können wir das noch beheben?
Sonst können wir vielleicht Herrn Guleit einfach auf Englisch hören,
Englisch, ja.
Ohne Übersetzung.
Herr Guleit, es gibt immer noch ein Problem. Frage an die Technik, können wir Herrn Guleit einfach in Englisch hören und wir übersetzen?
Ja, unser Vorschlag, wir setzen so lange die Diskussion fort. Wir sind interessiert daran zu hören.
So we have to continue because we still have the technical problem. Bishop Dominic and Prince Ludwig. So in this country we were really affected by the Ukraine war, the crisis, you know, since February. A lot of people are concerned and worried about the future because of this event. So you don't get a lot of information how African countries and Kenya are affected. And so you're surprised to hear that still this crisis and the war has effects on a country like Kenya. Can you describe how you experience this crisis and the events from Ukraine? And what do you think about that?
Well, this war in Ukraine is affecting all over everybody in the world, including Kenya. For example, the price of fuel has gone very high, and so people cannot afford now to buy fuel as they used to do. Also, when it comes to agriculture, for example, the prices of fertilizers, because in Kenya we import fertilizers from outside and from Ukraine, I think. So it is also affecting the farmers. Without fertilizers, they cannot grow their crops. And also wheat, it has affected also because in Africa normally we hardly grow wheat, but we import. We eat bread, so we need wheat. So it is affecting us in a very big way from those three perspectives.
Ich sage schon Bischof Ludwig, verzeihen Sie. Man kann schon mal durcheinander kommen. Ich habe meinen weißen Kragen, ich sehe nicht so gut aus der Entfernung. Prinz Ludwig, ich wollte Sie nur als Ergänzung dazu fragen. Sie hatten vorher beschrieben, der Preis für Baumaterialien vor Ort in Kenia.
Well, Bishop Dominic has already described it, especially also prices for food. This is something that is worrying us, especially, for example, the price for cornmeal is especially expensive, and if it's getting more expensive, then it leads to problems, also political problems. And you have to look at the different regions, of course, and there are some people that are really at the border to poverty or even below that border or that limit. And for example, if rice or flour costs double here in Germany, then we notice it, but it's not that bad for us. But if you have to spend half or more than half of your income for food, then of course this is an enormous problem, and there are people that are really affected by this. And we also notice it when it comes to food at schools, which is also very important in Kenya. The budgets are really it's a problem if you calculated that you have to have I don't know, that X amount of pupils per year, and then suddenly the prices go up so much, then that's a problem, of course. Also, for development for organizations that did not calculate this, then there are programs and projects that have to be stopped, because what is happening in the Ukraine also has effects in Kenya, especially when it comes to food. And there are people, especially also many children, unfortunately, that really have to suffer due to this. I would like to ask a question to Mrs. Tata regarding food and food uncertainty in Africa. You, in your articles and your publications, you mentioned this problem often, and in your last article I read that you quoted the Burkinian state president Thomas Sankara, who said, "Look on your plate, this imported rice, corns, maize, etc. That is imperialism." And corn, etc. So this, could you explain this problematic to us? Why do we have on the African continent food uncertainty and also such dependency? Has that always been the case? Well, this is a good question. You know that during colonial times, the changes when it comes to food, there were a lot of changes. So everything was changed during colonialism, the way that people ate, and it was changed to the advantage of the other people from outside, and that led to the fact that in these countries they are not, or they do not eat the food anymore that is naturally there. So what was eaten before is not what is eaten now. And now, for example, they eat baguette bread from France, different types of wheat, for example, that is from other countries. And the structures that were left behind, also political structures, the economical structures, led to the fact that a lot of food was imported or exported. And the topic of food uncertainty is something that was often not talked about in many African countries. And in this case, today you can see it, what dependency leads to, even though many countries in Africa have a lot of soil that they could use agriculturally. They do not do it. There is no agriculture because there are things that are missing, and Why is this the case? And yes, these are things when it comes to food certainty, political structures, economy, etc. You really have to look at the dependencies that are still existing between the African and the European countries and why this is the case. Thank you very much. We later are going to discuss what politics looks like or what can be done in order to avoid these dependencies or get rid of them, and also the role of the international organizations of the Western countries, etc. But maybe we will try to speak to Goulet again. Maybe the third time will work because it would be really interesting to hear what he has to say. So, question to the technicians. Can we try it? Thank you. Mr. Goulet, we will try once again. So we will try to listen to you in English and then we will translate.
It is
Regionen Kenias.
So Mr. Goulet is saying that especially it is important to look at the least developed regions in Kenya. There are some cities that have big improvement, and this is one of the regions, for example, where Mr. Bishop Dominic is also, and where he has worked, and also the Learning Alliance are rooted there. So I think that when I was in Kenya, I also heard that the Catholic Church also played the role of the government somehow, and was kind of an actor. And you also were able to hear what Mr. Goulet has said, that regions or projects from the government always somehow not look at the least developed regions. Why is this the case? Is it still the case? And if yes, why?
For example, in Lodwar, Turkana, the Catholic Church has been there since 1961, even before independence. And thanks be to the missionaries who came there and also working very closely with the people, the church has been able to make a huge impact on the lives of the people there. So for a long time, because those regions were sort of marginalized, and the resources were just concentrated on the towns. So that was the big problem, that the government was not really actively present in those areas. And that's where the church had to be strong there and to ensure that it reaches out to partners, especially outside, like now missio, Munich and other partners, to come and help us. But since the year 2013, the dynamics have changed now, because of what we call devolution in Kenya. Now we have what we call counties, and the central government has been now distributing funds to the counties, and that is making also a huge difference now. So if these resources are utilized very well, because one of the problems we have has been the problem of corruption, that the money which comes to the counties are not utilized well. But if there is that willingness really to help the people, to use the resources which are there for the common good of the people, I believe things are changing. And we are going to see a lot of development in those areas.
Prince Ludwig, this is a region where there are a lot of needs, but also there is a lot at stake. Not only thematically the region is difficult, maybe it was neglected, but there were also resources that were found there, for example, raw materials. So how are the interests changing when it comes to this? So my question is, how can you make sure that the local citizens that live there, that they also profit from this? If these neglected regions, if they look at it in more detail, how can it be made sure that also the people profit from this? Well, the people that live there, I would always suggest them to not rely on the fact that there will be a governmental-ridden development, so to speak. If it's the case, then it would be good, of course. And of course, in Turkana, etc., things have changed. Roads have been built, and I was pretty astonished also by what the things have happened. There was also kind of a bridge that was built. When it was the first time when I was there, Bishop Dominic was pretty new there, and there were like 20 cars only, and now bridges are needed. So yeah, you can see that things are changing. And yes, there are also, of course, cities that profit from this, and there are cities that are more outside in the bushes, so to speak. You can use the word here because it's really the truth. There are people that live in the desert, and from local materials they build up their houses, and they have the priority to have access to clean water, and to wait that the government suddenly solves everything. This is unrealistic. Of course, the government is doing something, and maybe the government is also going to build wells, but there are a lot of people living there, and there are also people. There are more and more people born, and there is an average of child birth of 6 to 7 childs per mother. So the it's exploding, so to speak, and this is also due to climate change. Maybe the situations are also going to get worse. Normally nomads were living there and are still living there, and back then you could feed yourself with camels, etc. But now, due to the amount of people living there, this is not possible anymore, and there are things that are done for the people there, but you start with the most basic needs. And first of all, it was about hunger, help, then medicine, help. We are Christians, and we do not want somebody to die in front of our eyes because they do not have food, and we also want people to have basic medical needs covered. But there are more and more people, as I have mentioned, and the problem is that sometimes people, instead of improving, the situation worsens, and this is a big challenge. So I think that because we want to be positive, of course, we do not only want to see the problems all the times, but here at this point, you should maybe not always think about the classical ideas of development aid, about imitating the story of Europe, and everything has to happen the way it happens in Europe. No, because the African solutions that are born within Africa are better than ours, and Africa has the chances, even in poor regions, to do things. And there is this leapfrogging, for example. If there are a lot of hurdles, obstacles, then sometimes ideas develop faster, and you were able to see that with phones, etc. From economic perspective, people have to walk 10 kilometers to get water, but they have 4G on their phone. And there are reasons it's working. And economically speaking, businesses have seen that if there are people that, even if they're poor, they want to have a mobile phone, of course. And the banking sectors, for example, they can build it up. In Kenya, there are only a couple of people who have a bank account. But if one if one person sells sheep or whatever to another person, then they can do it via the phone. You enter a code and it's paid, and we are far away from such fast transactions. And this is why I'm saying, if you really want to look at the problems, then you should really think about not only our development ideas, but about helping the people on the site, on the location, to develop their own ideas, and to simply help Africa develop their ideas, but not to dictate their ideas. And yes, I would like to mention here something, Mrs. Tata.
Maybe it would be smarter to worry less about, or to try with development aids to provide help to improve the situation, but also to go on with what Mr. Gullit said before, that his government hopes that now countries like Kenya would be seen as, partners on eye level, and that there could be natural growth by trade and revenues. Wouldn't that be the better approach? So maybe with that development aid, maybe we are standing in the way of something sometimes. Yeah, this is the question. There's this country, and how countries have developed after development aid. Why do countries think how development aid is going to be developed? Africans are no different people like others. They need the same things, the same measures, like many other countries as well. If you look at the economic development, so how should countries develop And when you have a scientific cooperation with the EU, always at the benefit of the European countries, at the downside of the African countries, of the free trade zone. Although you know that the African countries have to develop. These are small elements, but they make a big picture when you control the development in those countries. So the Africans don't have the same starting position like we have in Europe. When it comes to financing, Europeans have more access to banks where they can also lend cheap money. So these are benefits for European countries, but the African countries don't have that. So that means there are a lot of hurdles, and there's the bank, the IWF or the UN. Mostly they work at the detriment of the small African countries. So if you don't stop these unfair framework conditions, then the economic development in African countries cannot move forward. So which means if the economic development goes on, then there will be no jobs for the young people. And that's why I keep saying we need to move away from this development aid to Africa. Instead, we need to make fair trade with Africa. Transparently, and a fair trade is important. Thank you very much for that. So I also have the idea that some companies and some entrepreneurs that work on the African continent criticize, and they're right so, that the African economies and the African economies are not being protected by themselves, like the Western economies are doing that. So we have the anti-dumping laws. Nothing may not be donated, or something be donated or sold under value. So that means everything needs to have a certain price here in Europe. But in African countries, industries, economies are being flooded by aid goods, where, these relief and aid supplies, where companies who want to, invest, then they stand there with their own risk and they have to fight and have to make sure that, so how in the same area, at the same time, huge amounts of development aid who are making the same projects and are just donating that. I mean, that would not be possible because that is not fair. So maybe we should talk about things like that more instead of just talk about the symptoms. I know it's a suggestive question. How do you see that? Actually, it's a topic where I think most people who deal with the topic of Africa, you need to talk more often about this unfair and unjust methods. But the reality is different. If every individual African country tries to fight against these methods, then they're receiving sanctions from European side, or they would not get the development aid anymore. And the development aid is also used in order to blackmail those countries. It's a method, it's a way of controlling, it's a control tool in order to keep those countries dependent. So when we talk about independent countries in Africa, I can only laugh. A lot of countries in Africa are not independent economically and politically, and that's why we will always continue to have problems with their development. Mr. Goulet, you are so responsible for the Kenyan government, also for support programs and investments by the World Bank. So what do you say? How can we have targeted help without causing any damage? Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Goulet. And that implies two questions, actually. So, Prince Ludwig, one question is the question of the young population that needs to be educated and trained for modern workspaces. That is one of the major challenges in this region. So when there are modern developments and market access, I need to be fit in order to move on these markets and to be able to produce my products. How can you manage that in a short period? You know, it's a lot about talents of people. So that, you know, so you find talented people in Bavaria, but also in Africa and Asia, everywhere. So you always find the same number of ingenious people and those who are hardworking, and there's a small number of people who are entrepreneurs. Others might be very disciplined in their working method. You know, you find these talents everywhere, you know. But here, we always have low unemployment rates. In Germany, we are taking our entire talent pool and use it for a greater economy. So it's all about human beings. It's not about wheat or corn. This is about human people. And this is definitely not possible yet in Kenya. There are a lot who have went to school, and, you know, so everyone basically goes to school. Only in the northern regions, there might be 30 or 40% who are not able to go to school. But how does this continue in school? In Kenya, everyone wants to go to the university. And, you know, there are some great universities with great studies and where you can also receive great specialists. But there are so many small universities who are issuing certificates, but where you know that many who come and show the certificate, realistically speaking, have a low chance on getting a workplace, as compared to someone who has studied here in Germany or studied in Germany, compared to someone who has studied at the same level in Kenya. These are different worlds. So in Kenya, you have a certificate, but no experience in your job. And that is something that is truly difficult. There's training, there's a lot of training in those countries, also on the academic side. But there's not many chances, practically. And also, we all know, so definitely we learned something at the university and in the vocational school. But the actual learning came later, when we worked. And many people don't have this chance in Kenya. So how do you solve that? Well, you have to motivate people to start learning it and start working practically. And in some industries, this works great, like in the digital industries. So we don't have the downsides, like we have to build a road first or build a railway track to get that service. No. So people who have internet access, people can make, you know, remote practical work for German companies in Africa. And if you work on a self-employed basis, someone can be in the province in Turkana and start his or her own internet agency and write web pages in the whole world. We have shown that this is possible, but this positive potential has to be calculated. So we can't wait that the countries will, you know, develop well by big trade streams, but now we have to start at this point that there are so many young talents that we can set them in a global setting. We have to door the open to Corona. So we have learned how to work with the microphones and how to make video conference, even if it does not work every time, but somehow it works. And so everyone who is in Germany or Bavaria who wants to become a company, theoretically, has the proper possibility. English is being spoken anyway, and we have live translation tools. And so Google Meet, for example, or Google Zoom, you can have a live translation in a stream. So that means everyone who has a company in Bavaria could also think about it to employ African people to make practical terms. They came from Turkana, from Nairobi, or from the entire continent. That is possible today. And so we have to start to think more modern and to see how we can help these young people who have hardly any chances, also to make them give the chance to work practically.
Would you say, because a question that is always also part of this, that if you open doors, then the question that is discussed, also for Bishop Dominic, this question, out of your experience, a lot of young people say that at home in Kenya or maybe in another African country, I do not have enough chances. I'm going to try to go to another country. I want to have a better life in another country. Maybe a lot of Kenyans, for example, go to Arabic states, Saudi Arabia, other countries, because the way to Europe is limited, restricted. It's not possible or almost not possible to do a legal migration to Europe for work. So would you say it would be maybe a good way to open borders for talents of Kenya to come to Europe, to use it better? Because we have the discussion that there is a lack of experts in different industries here in Europe. So would it be an idea to open those ways for these peoples? I don't know who wants to answer first.
Well,
Go ahead.
Let me say something, because one thing which we need to really strengthen, especially among our young people, is that to believe in themselves, to believe that we can actually do things in Africa without the need to go out. It's good if we are exposed, you come, you see new things, but when we see these things, what should really be in our minds and our hearts is that we would like to go back to Africa and do and develop these things. We have huge potential. Africa has a huge potential in all aspects, even in the area of agriculture and all that. But we are still, as the lady said there, that we still have this colonial mentality, I mean, thinking that we have to look upon other people to help us, to do things for us. But I believe it is high time whereby we, and our people there, the young people in Africa, begin to think outside the box and see, come up with new ideas in which we can actually develop our country. And those ideas should come from us. And then from there, then we can ask some people to support us so that we can put these ideas into practice and believe that we have to do it, because Africa has to be developed by Africans, not people from outside. But when we have partners with people from outside, then we are able to develop. And will not be having this need to really want to get out of the situation and go out and maybe come to Europe for a better life. I believe we can actually do that. We can actually do that.
Do you want to say something? Mrs. Tata has also nodded and has clapped. I think that regarding development, this was also mentioned, that school education was not reformed. Many countries work as back in colonialism, and this school education does not reflect the environment right now, the needs right now of these cities. And this is why they produce students, or students come out that have diplomas in history, literature, etc. But this is not something that will give you food or money. And the school education should be reformed in such a way that there are people who can work as craftsmen, as agriculturists, that can solve the problems that we have in the countries. But if these countries, the political elite, if they do not reform the school education, then we will have these problems for a long time, and we will be talking about this, because this is one of the basic problems, that these graduated university students, they do not have work, they do not have businesses, they're maybe not creative enough to start businesses or to do any other things because they just learn theory, they do not have any practical experience. And this is something that as an African, or as African countries, we have to change.
What is happening in Kenya now is that the government is changing the education system. We have what we call competence-based curriculum, CBC. And the government has really pushed for this, and especially the old government. But the new government has called in a group of experts to really study and see how this could be fine-tuned so that it can really answer the needs of the people of Kenya. And I believe that is the way we need to go, because it is true that the system which we have been having has not been really helping people to be more practical, helping people to think and come up with solutions. So I believe this is the way we need to go now. And as a country, we are going that way now.
Yes, this is also a good example that every country or each region in Africa has to find their own paths. And a lot of things have been done in development work. We have talked a lot about how reforming school education. There were a lot of efforts, for example, from Germany and Austria, that this dual system of learning, education and working, so hand in hand, to transfer this to Africa, but it's not working. So here, for example, in Germany, it's working to have such a dual system because everyone that wants to be a carpenter will find a business where he can do his practical work. But in Kenya, we do not have enough active businesses that have the competence not only to develop furniture but also on a high level, and that can on a high level educate other students. So such a concept that is working for us, great. And I think that our system is good. I'm a friend of dual systems, but it's not something that can be transferred one-to-one in the same way. So it's okay that that a carpenter does not only sit in a room, but that also does practical work. But it should be looked at how this works in Kenya. Maybe we need more educational business that are maybe also connected to trade and to other things, so that the school becomes, so to speak, the factory. So maybe you have to think in another way. You have to come up with ideas that suit every job, and you have to look at how things work on site in the countries. And we are on the right path, but nevertheless, I think that many educational systems and many countries in Africa, also in Kenya, there's a lot of things that are being done, but still innovation is needed and also boldness is needed to go the own African path and not to listen too much on the pressure, because sometimes we feel we always want to show how things have to be done because it's working in our countries, but this is not the way. So you have to confront that pressure and say, no, we want to go our own path. And I think that this is going to happen more and more.
Yeah.
Mr. Goulet, as a government, are you working on this? Because it is very important. Or is it the right path, would you say that? That you also decide which kind of support you want to have from the outside. And maybe you sometimes have to take popular decisions and also say maybe goodbye to some other donors who say they want to implement their own ways of thinking. So what is your point of view regarding this?
developing skills. We are going to look at the future of our educational system. But referring back to now, the challenges that we are facing in Kenya and Africa as a whole is that we have this dependency challenges. For example, Kenya and like many African countries is still a primary exporter of primary goods instead of exporting, finished and refined goods. So you will realize again that many of these businesses are still dominated by institutions and companies that come from the developed world. So what we need to make sure is that we work towards creating an environment where there is mutual partnership in terms of looking at strengthening. For example, the manufacturing industry is still in Kenya growing, even though we are better than many of our neighbors, but still we are in need of strengthening that aspect so that we are able to supply what our population really needs. Because right now a lot of the finished products and goods come from outside the country, and that
kommen von anderen Ländern dann.
And whether it's coming from outside, particularly from the Far East and Europe, and they come at a very expensive cost, and it causes imbalance
schließt sich hier noch eine Frage an, die ich gerne stellen würde. Also wenn wir zusammenfassend feststellen, dass afrikanische Nationen sich selbst entwickeln sollten, eigenen Ideen,
with their own ideas, with their own creativity, their own visions.
Wo ist unsere Rolle?
What is our role when here in Europe?
Braucht es das Wittelsbacher Engagement
Why
in Kenia?
Do we need the Wittelsbach commitment? Why do we need the connection with the bishops and the foundation? So what would you say? What is our role? What is our task? What are your expectations? So also Mr. Tata, Mr. Goulet, this would be something that would be interesting for us before we open the forum for questions. So this would be interesting to know.
Auf welche
So which are the aspects that are most important, so to speak?
Soll ich das erste oder?
Should I start?
Bitte, Bischof
ich denke mal, man muss wirklich mal...
What is the role now of our partners, our friends?
Also unsere Partner, unsere Freunde.
What we need here is to have a dialogue, to talk together. And then we are able to, for example, express or indicate those areas where we feel we can work together. Because if we are journeying together, I think we will achieve more than just to. Because the problem is if we just in Africa we sit down expecting other people to do things for ourselves, that will not help us to think and to come up with our own solutions. On the other hand, we know that we still need a hand, we still need help, so that we can move from where we are to a higher level. So I believe that talking together, dialoguing together, and also, I mentioned earlier that when we are exposed to another reality, like when I come to Germany and I see things, I get new ideas. And when I go home, I would really want to see, to put into practice what I have seen. But I know I cannot do it on my own. So I reach out now to our partners, to friends, so that we can work together. I want to give you an example of a school which we constructed in London because we saw the need of our students, young people coming from different parts of Turkana and even beyond, so that they can learn to live together and also get education. And that school, we named it Queen of Peace because we saw that we needed to have or create an environment where our people can learn to live together. And so we came up with the idea, and then after that we approached Prince Ludwig, I remember that time, and he was able to, to help us to set up this school, which now it is one of the best schools in Turkana. So, but the idea had to come from us and say, we need this kind of, we see a problem here and we would like to solve this problem, especially when our people can come together, our students can come together, and that's how we were able to move forward. So that dialogue, talking together and journeying together, for me, will take us to higher places than where we are at the moment.
Ja, also ich bin jetzt hier sozusagen auch von der Seite der deutschen Entwicklungshilfe, auch wenn es mehr private Entwicklungshilfe ist, aber wir halt mit Spendengeldern arbeiten und viele Spender haben. Ich kann nur sagen, es gibt immer sinnvolle Sachen, die man tun kann, die
sensitive things, reasonable things that can be done. And I think the example of Bishop Dominic was very interesting and very good when it comes to schools. There are regions where people cannot go to school. Also in Turkana, not everyone is able to go to school because there are not enough schools yet. And it is important to make this happen. And it's not just about going there and build the schools according to our perceptions, but we have to talk to the people and ask them what they really need. The Queen of Peace, it was also about values, and it was very important for us in the city. It was the only city in this region, and it was important to have a school for girls also, for example, because we have the hope when it comes to girls that they come back to the region, and especially the school from Catholic sisters is something that can also forward these Christian values and also values that are altruistic, that are important, what home means, etc. And this was important back then and is still important. And there are also other schools that can be built that are maybe somewhere in more rural areas, and it's about how to get the children to school, for example. This is also a big challenge, to convince the parents to let their children to go to school instead of, for example, marrying the girls, their daughters, at an early stage in life, which is unfortunately still a custom. So you have to understand the people, and you have to work together with bold people from these regions. And this is our task, that we stop saying, okay, we have the solutions and we're going to give you the solutions and that's it, and we just go. But it's about going there, listening actively and helping to achieve the visions of the people there. And I think that this is how development aid should work.
So, Ms. Dada, would you like to add something to that? Yes, is there anything that you
Aber ich habe eigentlich vorhin nicht gehört, was der Bischof gesagt habe. Weil das kann sein, dass Sie vielleicht was gesagt haben, was ich jetzt wiederholen werde. Ich denke mal, es ist klar, dass die Afrikaner ihre Entwicklung selber steuern müssen. Und aber um das richtig zu machen, müssen die erstmal ihre, ich sag immer, ihre Denkweise und ihre Handel dekolonisieren. In vielen von den Ländern oder bei vielen von unseren Bürgern, wir orientieren uns noch sehr stark an Europa. Ja, und das
which means that this lacks in the believability in their own solutions. First of all, you need to believe in your own solutions. So you need to decolonize the societies. People have to start thinking and acting differently, and that they should take their tasks into their own hand instead of waiting that money comes from Europe or that project proposals come from Europe. So they should not wait for that, because the African countries are so rich in resources, and still they are poor. this is impossible. How can this be? And this simply shows if those countries and if the societies have really decolonized, then they should be able to use the resources that they have. And they should use that in order to move on with the development of their countries. But as long as they have these resources, and if only the European or Western countries benefit, or only the Asian countries benefit from that, that means that the African countries will further depend from the donations and also from the money from projects. And you have to disrupt that chain. And that's what I meant. So in a birth, you need to cut the umbilical cord between Africa and Europe so that, Africans can come to themselves and then they can start with partnerships. Yes, right. At that point, we would like to invite you to ask questions, both in the room but also online, per chat digitally. Klaus Steiner would like to ask a question. Welcome to this round. Member of the Bavarian Parliament, development expert, and he traveled to Africa quite a lot. So maybe you can tell whom you would like to address with that question. So I'm saying this, who has been working in Latin America and Africa, but also politically, but also privately. So when you go to the two schools in the Maasai location and also in the hospital, so that has been financed and supported by 35 years. So education is an important point. Then the dual training also includes so strangely enough, this has been developed in the apartheid time when Mercedes-Benz and were sent into their own vocational school. But our potential has been failed. And so that's what I heard today, so that people are waiting for the aid. So even if they could, they're still waiting for that. So they don't know about the complex connections in Africa. So now, when the German politics was also a development minister, and when they don't know about the complex connections, and so that's my concrete questions. So things that have been missed. So that's why I would like to hear from everyone. So the role of the government. So naturally, the colonial period, the limits, the borders, that were made by the colonial powers. But for example, Kenya 50 years ago was in a much better shape than now. Much better than now. What happened? And that's what I keep realizing. This lack of responsibility of the governments, the rural spaces, education was missed a lot. So not many people are interested in that. And that's why I'm happy that the elections have worked. But, that is the lowest level that we could actually expect, And it's good that at least, that should be much more. Kenya, Tanzania, they're so rich countries. And I have three examples, Zimbabwe, where the government, so without or without a supply chain, with or without fair trade, irrespective of all other things, they have put it down and really destroyed everything. And Burkina Faso, Jeanette Weiss knows that. She's an expert. In Burkina Faso, 20 to 30 years ago, we had a president who said, stop. no more exploitation. And don't complain anymore. He took things in their hands. Burkina Faso now has a very good development. So what is the role of governments? You know, there should more that should happen instead of waiting from the help from Europe or from Germany or from someone else. So would you like to hear the opinion? Thank you. So maybe we can also, you know, turn to Mr. Kulet, hoping that we can hear him. Maybe English would be enough. Maybe that's a good moment to say that the Kenyan government is actually at the point where you say, okay, that's a restart. New concepts have been developed, and Mr. Colette has compared it also with Europe, in particular in Eastern Europe, but also the earlier GDR and Eastern Germany after the reunification was a good example, so that we don't probably perceive here that they have decided to develop the country, and that it can also be a success story, that the Kenyan government can also be taken as an example for themselves. That is an interesting idea. So do we have any further questions? Sandra Chong, who moderates the chat. There was one question that Bishop Dominic partly answered about the elections. So why were there, riots? Why could the riots be avoided like in Eldoret? But also additional questions. These atrocities between the ethnic group, has this still be there? Or maybe this is to be grateful to the candidate for the president that it was quieter this time. What was the reason why it was quieter?
Somebody in Kenya described the politics this time round as really not based on tribalism, but based on ideas. So, because before that, the problem, and you have mentioned about tribalism, was a big issue. So people would vote for a candidate because he or she comes from his tribe. But this time round, it was about ideas, about what could work best for us. So I think the path we have followed would really, I would say it will help to end this thing, which has really troubled us for many years, of tribalism and of negative ethnicity, because that has been a big problem. And hopefully that from now on, we shall learn to live as a nation, to learn really to live together as one people. And because that has been the challenge all along. And we have realized that without peace and people living together, there is no development. We cannot develop. So I believe what contributed to the stability of our country has been that precisely that we have gone now beyond tribalism, and we are now looking at those ideas which can build our nation and bring us together.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions? Matthias Eter from the Institute for Interreligious Dialogue asks, Islamic Studies in Agiamondo is asking, in Nairobi. So we can say that there was not only technological leapfrogging, so that one development step was left away, and that was really nicely described by Prince Ludwig of Bavaria. So on a social level, we have great developments in Kenya. So in my case, I can definitely say for the interreligious dialogue. So where do the partners for these dialogues, or the German partners, what are the biggest chances for Europe and to learn from Africa, and why is it not happening really at the moment yet? I believe, that's something where we can still learn a lot. We can learn from this interchange in details. So I mentioned the mobile phone, so that's a continent is much stronger than us. And we can only, look at this great development when it comes to mobile communication, but also in other areas. Specifically in the African culture, we have a lot of interesting elements. And this could be like in design. So in the past few years, I worked a lot with Francis Carey in Burkina Faso, who is an unbelievable visionary architect, who is able to use simple materials in order to build buildings with natural ventilation. The buildings he built have such a great CO2 footprint. We can only dream of that. These are highly innovative ideas, and where you really realize these are truly African ideas. So you can really feel the African part of it. So leapfrogging is not only related to technology, but that also works in design, but also in interreligious dialogue. There are a lot of things that we can also learn from African societies that we can take by talking to the African societies. There are a lot of things culturally, so not everything that comes is good, of course. So when you work a lot and when you talk with the tribes, like in Turkana, then you find a lot of problems there. But you also find in between nice things as well, good things. So a problem could be, for example, that men and women in a meeting, first of all, are being separated. But then you realize also after some time that this also have some positive elements that speaking for the community. So since they're being separated, that things are being articulated. So we kept saying, okay, you don't have to sit together, but the women and the youth, there should be always one spokesman. And I think the diocese also added that always there was a, women representative and a youth representative who have the same speaking time. And that's what you realize in the social area. So you can also talk about, so you can learn from the small dialogue in a bush in a village, but you can also learn from great creative spirits in this country. But even in technology, Africa does not need to be hide away. They can even be much better than us. Do we have any further questions? So I can also address the question also to Mrs. Tata, that the question that was just raised. So what could be the possible learning effects? What are the takeaways for us in Europe? What can we learn from Africa? I know it's a wide question. Yeah. Now, when you have African solutions, and it's very difficult to bring it to take along as an idea. It's difficult for us. So once we see how the continent is still being depicted, in Germany or in the German media, that shows that there's no appreciation for the current situation in Africa and also for today's situation in Africa. Because the continent is always being seen as if it was 60 years ago. Africa has moved away from that, and so it was shown by the other speakers. A lot has been done in the continent, but this is not appreciated enough in Europe. So we have to start there, where you work when you have a certain respect, for the cultures of Africa, for the way of living for the Africans, and the mutual respect for the life of the others. So that means when you start there, then in case you have open eyes and open ears, and you can also approach each other, and both sides can learn. There are lovely things and shadowy things, and when you're open, you can learn both, good things from both. Thank you very much, Mrs. Tata. Monsignor Huber. Yes, I would like to expand what you actually said. And with all those encounters and meetings and the great exchange that Bishop Dominic also spoke about, and also Prince Ludwig talked about that, which are necessary so that we can also do things together and develop things. So I believe, in particular, so based on my experience, I basically believe in the field of interreligious dialogue, of having a relaxed communication and dealing with each other, all the way to not only between Muslims and Christians, but also the question, what about the exchange with the natural religions down there as a possibility? And I also believe, what we hear in our highly industrialized society, that we deal with the nature, treat nature. That always shows to what extent we have so when how much we depend on this one nature, how Francisco developed it and mentioned it in his laudatio. But we live in and about this world and with this world. So there are a lot of positive approaches there. Prince Ludwig also mentioned that in his question as to how can things that are being built and how can things be combined with the question of CO2 emissions and other things with regard to materials that are being localized there. Generally speaking, I also would like to take along with me, so in this World Mission Month at the moment, to say, right, specifically on the African continent, in particular in Kenya, there's a lot of hope for us as well. Thank you. We have another question from the chat.
Yes, it is according to what Mrs. Tata has said. How can the umbilical cord between Africa and Europe, so to speak, how can that be cut? Shall I answer? Okay, well, this question is also connected to the previous question about politics, about change in politics in Africa. We, in this case, have to see that in many countries, I always say many countries, not in all countries, but in many countries in Africa, the political structures to reflect the European structures. That means that after the independence, so to speak, after the Europeans left, the Africans continued in the same way. So the Europeans left, and the only thing that changed were the colors of the skin. It were black people, but they were still working on behalf of the Europeans. And if this political structure still exists, and these political structures that reflect they do not reflect the lifestyle of the Africans, they do not reflect the way of working, the environment in Africa. And as if these artificial systems are still kept, then this is not going to serve the African citizens. And these political actors are Africans, but they are working on for their own interests and also for the interests of the Europeans. And this is why we talk about corruption. So if we do not reform the systems, update them, this is very important. It is important to update these systems. Once these systems are updated, then political actors can come. Back then in Burkina Faso, you mentioned this example of Burkina Faso. Thomas Sankara was one example of a person who tried to cut the umbilical cord, and what happened? He was killed. So that means that there are political actors that try to cut the umbilical cord, but they are killed by European agents, US agents, because the European countries still want to profit from African sources, and they want to avoid that an African is coming and saying, we want to use our resources and develop our countries and help our people. So this is a very complex behavior, and I think that this is very difficult to really cut this umbilical cord. But you can see that the revolution started in Mali, for example, in Kenya, and I think that there will be more revolutions to come. And this is my final sentence. Thank you very much. There is another question here. Yes, this is all right what you're saying regarding decolonization, that Africa is really and it is the umbilical cord of Europe, but there is a new umbilical cord to China, so to speak. And there are a lot of people, the Chinese people. I asked myself, how can that be possible that the same thing is being repeated, but that people in this case are happy about dependencies? So what do the Chinese people have that the European people do not have? Well, at this point, you could say that the Chinese are transparent and have clear goals. The Chinese think about 30, 40 years, and everything they do is really clear. They are for sure not altruists. Everything that Chinese people do is thought long term. That's good for China, but they are pretty transparent about it, so everyone knows why the Chinese are in Africa, what they are doing there, and there are deals that are offered that are pretty tough. They say, we're going to build the infrastructure. If you do not pay, then the haven belongs to us, for example, the port. So that's very clear, and for us Europeans, it is not as easy. We have a lot of conflicted interests, and for example, one of our delegations goes to Africa, then one is giving that promise, the other person is giving that promise. Maybe there are contradictions, and in Europe, in this Western world, we do have a lot of altruists that all of them want to help, and nobody, or not everyone knows what Africa looks like, and we also have economic interests because, of course, we also need these raw materials of the countries, because otherwise our economy would break down as well. So it's a mixture of interests and also altruism mixed with also political promises, and this is where the Chinese are easier to understand. There is another question in the chat, I think. One last question. There's room for one more question. Otherwise, I would like to summarize what we have talked about. This discussion round shows pretty well and clear how with dialogue and different ideas we can develop. And I think it was a very exciting exchange between Nairobi, Munich, Dortmund, and wherever people are listening to us. So thank you for that. And you can also see that if the technology does not work, there's still things that have to be done, but maybe we have to learn together with the Learning Alliance. Maybe we can get some training on that. And I can see that there is another question in the chat that we're going to ask. So we still have a couple of minutes left. Please go ahead. Yes, Mrs. Feuerstein says that emancipation is the key word, but what about countries in Africa where the structures in the society are not positive ones? For example, children that are being married, no pension system, kids that are being married. So do you want to keep that African way of life as well? Well, maybe this was something that Prince Ludwig has also talked about. So African cultures have to be appreciated or should be appreciated, but that means that there are also some negative aspects about it. Did I understand that correctly? Well, yes, every culture has positive and negative aspects. And if you think as a Christian, we see that values, they're universal values, of course, and it is clear that it is not okay that a girl with 14 years is being married or with 12 years. And we did not do it different 100 years ago. But with development, of course, every continent will find these values. But the good things in every culture should be promoted, and then helping getting rid of the negative parts. I think in Bavaria, for example, we also had some difficult parts of our history, of our culture, but nevertheless we have somehow managed it to keep our culture, the positive parts. We have great gun clubs, for example. We still wear our traditional dresses, and I hope that the African cultures can also develop being a certain sense of proudness of their cultures, but without being stuck in this bad situation. So for these cultures, for all these African cultures that exist, they all need their laptop and their traditional clothes, so to speak. Thank you very much. Do you want to add something?
This is in regard to cutting the umbilical cord. There is an African saying that if you want to travel very fast, go alone. But if you want to travel very far, go with others. Go with others. So I believe it's a question of creating synergy, not really, rupturing the relationships, but to see, as I said earlier, how we can create synergy together. There are a lot of things we can learn from the people of Europe. There are a lot of things we can learn from the people of Africa. And there are so many things which unite us together. Those values which make us feel we are one humanity, one family. So I believe, for me, that should be the approach, not to rupture the relationship, but really to find the best way in which we can create synergy and help one another to move together.
Thank you very much. We are almost coming to an end, and I think that what is pretty clear right now is that in the core it is about one thing, which is respect, mutual respect, that we that the African countries have the obligation and also the right, of course, to steer their nations and their countries as they want to, and that they can develop on their own, and that this is their own task and their responsibility. And everyone who wants to help or wants to be part of it, or thinks that he or she can contribute something, that they should keep it always in mind that they have to be somehow, they have to keep in mind that there are in a disordered situation. They are below, so to speak. This is what we have heard today. And they are subordinate. And also this Umbilical Accord, what we have heard, it is important that the governments have these scissors in their hand and they can cut these relations. And there are some countries that really say no to some helps that are being offered because they do not want to threaten their independency. For example, no to old clothes, no to imports of waste with which business can be done, but also no to financial aids or other presents if that threatens their own market. And I think that this responsibility is within the African countries, of course, and the citizens also have to claim that from their leaders. And as Mrs. Sutter has said it, we can also see it, that it's happening in Mali, for example, Burkina Faso. There are some revolutions. There is an uproar against the old ways, and people want to be their own. They do not want to be determined by others. They want to be self-dependent. And there are some tensions, and it's of course difficult to always to be in the right role, but it's worth fighting for, because we're not working against each other, but we're working together. And I think, having said that, we're going to continue working together, the Hanns-Seidel Foundation, together with Missio, and we together with the different organizations. And we want to exchange, of course, with all of you. And we would like to say sorry for the technical problems that we have had, but some things can be sent out later. Maybe we can get a statement from Mr. Goulet, and once this recording is being offered online, the statement can be sent out as well, so that they can listen to it. And also other contributions from our discussion participants. So thank you very much on behalf of the Hanns-Seidel Foundation, and the final word is for Mr. Seper. Thank you very much to all of you for this vivid discussion. Thank you, Mr. Goulet in Nairobi. All the best for you. Have a good future, hopefully a good future for Kenya. Thank you, Mrs. Tatar. We are looking forward to the next magazine of Africa Positive. I think it's a great magazine. So all of you keep connected with us, with Hanns-Seidel Foundation, with Missio. Please keep being interested in Africa, not only for Kenya, but also the other regions. It was really great to hear from first hand the experiences. Thank you, Mr. Bishop Dominic, for being here in Germany. I hope that you have a good stay here and that you go back home with a lot of interesting impressions. Also, Prince Ludwig, thank you very much for taking your time. All the best for the future. All the best to all of you. Get home safe. Thank you very much for to the translators, to the technicians, everyone that was in the back. It's not always that easy to organize an event as such, but I think that it worked quite well. So thank you very much and goodbye. All the best for you.